Hello, this is Joseph Zodel. The constitutional amending process made simple. Of interest to all, but especially to students, because many instructors have a way of making it very complicated. Coming up, we will build a chart. And when it is completely built, take a screenshot of it as a reference tool. For students, the instructors who sometimes don't do a really great job of explaining it, and those who do, often have a way of putting some trick questions on the final exam. So we'll look at a couple of those in order to help prepare you. So the amending process. To begin with, a possible amendment is introduced in one of the houses of Congress. In order for it to proceed on its way to become part of the Constitution, it has to be approved by 2/3 of each house, the House of Representatives and the Senate. That is not an easy bar to reach. Our founders did not want to make it easy to change the Constitution, but they wanted to make it possible. Once it's proposed by Congress to the states, we need 3/4 of the state legislatures to ratify it for it to become part of the Constitution. Presumably would never be less than 50%. That's 38 states. Because that would mean a minority could dictate over the will of the majority what was going to happen. So it's 38 states. But since the Constitution is unclear, it is indeed unclear from the information provided. And there we are. As soon as 38 Watch out for questions like this. The Secretary of State. And you can see from here how it is fairly easy to design questions that can be very confusing, except for people who really know what they're talking about, which includes you. And if you haven't taken a screenshot of that table, when we're done with the video, please be sure to go back and do so. Keep it as a study. And then it'll be up to those state conventions to decide whether or not to ratify. We would still need 3/4 of the conventions to ratify, and that once again is 38 states. That's only happened one time, and that was with the 21st Amendment, which was repealing the 18th Amendment, which was prohibition. And why? That's a story in itself that we'll get to in a future video. An alternative permitted in the Constitution, the states can request Congress to call a constitutional convention. We need 2/3 of the states to make that request. This has never been done since the original Constitutional Convention, which was at the time of the Articles of Confederation. So we need 2/3 of the states to request Congress to call a constitutional convention, which may be on a particular question or a particular suggested amendment that somebody has already written, or it could just be blanket. Let's have a constitutional convention and see how many amendments we can think up. It's wide open. 2/3 of the states must request Congress, and here we mean the state legislatures, but there is no constitutional provision about the percentage needed for that constitutional convention to propose the amendment back to the states. So it would be up to Congress ultimately to decide that. It could be 2/3, 3/4, or some other percentage. And you can combine these in whatever way. Congress can propose to the states, and the state legislatures have the power to ratify, or it could go to the state conventions. While the Constitutional Convention has not been used, still, the convention could refer to the state legislatures, or it could refer to state conventions. Now, on that question of how the state conventions would ratify, it really could be specified in the proposed amendment itself. Or it could be left to the states to decide exactly how to set those up, such as one delegate per congressional district, or one delegate per state legislative district, or some other way. So that is not as precise as when we're saying state legislatures ratify. That's pretty clear. So altogether, we have 4 possible ways to amend the Constitution. Pick one from the first column and one from the second column. You will end up with 4 possibilities. Now the question becomes the percentages. Really very easy. It is always 2/3 to propose and always 3/4 to ratify, no matter what. This is the complete chart that I want you to take a screenshot of if you are a student of American government. This is the simple way to look at. And I'd rather do it simple than do it complicated. It doesn't have to be complicated. So on to the final exam. Here is a possible question. A proposed constitutional amendment has been referred by Congress to the states. What percentage of the states must ratify the proposed amendment for it to become a part of the Constitution? You know from our discussion that is 3/4. Most political science teachers will include 2/3 as a choice. While that doesn't apply to ratification, it does apply to proposal. but they are figuring that the student who hasn't really studied is going to get confused. So that's almost always a possible choice. One half is a nonsense choice because that would be a tie vote. And none of the above, well, that catches some confused students too. So that's one possible question. Here's our second question. Congress received a petition from 2/3 of the states to hold a constitutional convention to consider a possible amendment. What is the vote required at the convention for it to be proposed to the states? The correct answer is D, unclear from the information provided. On any multiple choice test, watch out for statements like this because they just have a way of being the correct answer sometimes. This is one of those cases. 2/3 is the required percentage for the petition to Congress, which has already been done, or for 2/3 of each House of Congress to propose an amendment to the states. That's not the case here. 3/4 is the number of states that have to ratify the proposed amendment in order for it to become part of the Constitution, either by legislatures or by conventions within the states. 1/2 is a tie, so we don't like that one at all. But why is it really unclear is because the Constitution is unclear about how the convention will be set up. So as we mentioned, it could be done a couple of different ways, depending on what Congress decides to do. It could be 7/8, it could be 9/10, if it was some sort of a possible amendment that a majority of each House of Congress decided they really didn't want to see get anywhere. It presumably would never be less than 50%, because that would mean a minority could dictate over the will of the majority what was going to happen. But since the Constitution is unclear, it is indeed unclear from the information provided, and there we are. Watch out for a question like this. And you can see from here how it is fairly easy to design questions that can be very confusing, except for people who really know what they're talking about, which includes you. And if you haven't taken a screenshot of that table, when we're done with the video, please be sure to go back and do so. I hope you enjoyed today's video, found it interesting, found it informative. And if you did, please be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and click the notifications bell so you don't miss out on any of the new videos we'll have coming up. In the meantime, here are some videos that are on this channel right now for you to examine. Thank you for joining me today.